even at my darkest time, I remember sitting in my living room. I hadn't showered for probably a week. Like, I hadn't brushed my teeth. Like, I was just not able to take care of myself. Even the thought of like opening a cupboard to get a glass to get water, I couldn't even manage to like close that cupboard again. Like, it was just too much effort. Like, I just could not do it. My other job that I was at too was crumbling. So I really had nothing else to lose. So I remember just sitting there being like, okay, like I know this isn't it for me. Like,
and we're on. Hey everybody, welcome to Everybody Love Everybody with Katy and Jamey. I'm Jamey.
And I'm Katy.
And I hope everybody's having an awesome week. I think we got a pretty good episode for you guys here this week. We're going to talk about, get into our relationship a little bit, and actually Katy's going to tell her story and a little bit. Katy and I both live sober lives. I wouldn't take it as far as to say, like straight edge type deal, but both of us live sober, and I'm going on 4 years now without a drink, and Katy, I'll let you kind of take it over from there.
Well, I'll be actually taking 6 years here, October 28th.
Boom, congrats.
Thank you. So I'm very used to, like, in the community program, there's lots of programs out there where like you share your story to inspire, you share with people, like give them hope. It makes it easier for people to relate to. And I think also for our listeners, like it makes it easier to relate. And I find when I listen to, whether it's a YouTube channel or anything, I can't help but not like build a relationship with that person, even though it's kind of one-sided when I know their story. And that helps you guys decide whether you want to stick around and hear what we have to say, like just going further with our channel. But yeah, so starting with my story, it is, I mean, it's very up and down, I guess, colorful. There's things that I'm not sure how it's going to come out of my mouth today. I am a little bit nervous because I just don't want it. I want to remain light and have a good message. So
yeah, just be you, babe.
Yeah. So, I mean, before this too, like I was already talking to like my higher power or whatever, kind of like asking for like the message to be spoken through me. I did really want my egocentric type self to get out of the way. So for me, I was born in Prince George, BC. PG. My parents split when I was 4 years old. So like I've kind of just always known that. But before they split, we moved around a lot. I know that. But when they split, we were living in my grandparents' house. They had passed away. So my parents ended up moving us in there to basically help maintain. And up to that point, I was like of course, that's only 4 years. I mean, how much? But I was a pretty happy kid. I was always trying to entertain people. I would do anything to make someone laugh. And I was just really curious. I wasn't like shy, I guess. I was just, I just lived like a kid normally does, thinks the world revolves around it. And I thought I loved farm life. I mean, I spent like hours and hours. Me and my sister I have an older sister. We would spend hours just out playing in the field. So like I had a really good like base to my childhood. Lots of family. I come from a huge family. On my dad's side, he comes from like 15 brothers and sisters. So I always had like a really nice family environment.
And I know, and I always think that's crazy that like your grandma had fucking 15 kids. That's insane. That's like being pregnant for basically 20
your
years.
Whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Xylan, and I don't think I want to do it again.
15 kids. I know, that shit blows my mind.
Well, and that's the thing. It was just, those were the days too, right? So a lot of that too is like growing up. My dad has like a big part of my story. I love my father so much, but I mean, back then my grandparents had kids so that the kids would take care of themselves and then help take care of the farm, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, they didn't quite get, I would say, their needs met maybe the way that they needed. So naturally things get passed on, right?
Well, and we've talked about this before as well, and how basically our parents were trying the best they could with what they knew and how they were raised. And it's easy to judge and say, you guys fucked up as parents and you didn't do this properly, especially like going into 2020, how we're so politically correct now. And it's super easy to judge our parents' generation.
Yeah.
But really, we got to put ourselves in their shoes and in their perspective, and how they grew up, right?
My focus, especially with Zyla, is like doing generational like healing. I feel like if one family member, like it starts with just one family member and it becomes like a domino effect. So it's like making those little changes and finding like the forgiveness, because although maybe I was hurt by my parents in certain ways, but as I get older I can really like see them and appreciate them for where they are, especially as now I'm like getting to their age and I'm like, oh, what were they doing when they were my age, and like relating and knowing that they were almost like products of their environment growing up. And we're lucky today because we have the internet and a lot more social media that is enlightening us, that is it's like encouraging us to grow and evolve as individuals, as spiritual beings. And it's actually like becoming more, there's more advocates out there for like self-love and teaching us how to self-respect. So I think that's a huge deal. And as I get older, I'm starting to soften. It's that victimhood is like really, it doesn't carry as much power anymore.
Yeah. So I think it has a lot to do with self-awareness. Okay. So we're acknowledging that we're aware that our parents grew up in a different format, a different style. And yes, we acknowledge that they were trying the best that they could, but lots of them fucked it up majorly with kids these days. Like that's just how it is. And so it's just it's a fine line of blaming and just having understanding, I think, right? And for us to try and do better. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off from your story, but I just thought we should touch on that.
Well, I feel like it's not serving me to blame my parents or anybody for that matter, my teachers, friends, or whatever. I feel like the whole point is because I want people to have the same, like if I want someone to forgive me and have loving understanding towards me, I have to have the same. So in order to get it, I have to give it. And I'm learning that it's like, I know I've made a lot of mistakes and I know that my intentions were, and most likely, like generally people have good intentions and I generally come from a good place. Like I meant well and I never ever want to hurt anybody, but I fucking hurt people sometimes. And it's like, when I am met with compassion and given space and understanding for that allows me to change and grow. But to hold somebody in like an old version of themselves or a mistake is just like, it's just recycling traumas and anger and hurt and regrets and resentments. And it's like, okay, it's time to move on.
Yeah. Enough of that shit. Yes.
So that's a lot of what my story is like overcoming, and I'm still in that, right? There's still parts of me that are held by that inner child, but that work comes from me. I can't seek that anywhere else, right? Like I cannot get that healing from anyone else. It has to come from within. So where was I? Anyways,
okay, so you were
4 years old. My parents split up. My mom left she went and moved. She left the farm, so my dad ended up staying on the farm, not for much longer. And I know that was like really hard for me. I know that was like a transforming type thing, like that left a mark on me. Because quite often I remember if something would happen, I quit. Like as a little kid, I would cry, like begging, like I will do this and this if my parents would get back together. So it was hard on me, but I'm also grateful that it happened at such a young age, because I see kids when they're like teenagers and then their parents split. And that it's almost like a harder pill from the swallow was for me. Like it was so young and it just became a new normal, like very quickly. So my parents kind of moved on fairly quickly. My mom has been, basically with the same man since she remarried. He has 3 kids himself. And we're all like a pretty close family. And my father, he also moved on quite quickly, but he's remarried now, but there was other women before that, right? So that was like always an adjustment for me. And that, for me, I think still to this day, I struggle with the aspect like of trusting, letting people in, because it seemed like people was like, it was a revolving door. So I knew like eventually I learned like what was the point of getting too close to anyone. I knew that nobody was actually going to be there for very long, especially like with step parents or whatever. Generally, like when they split, you never see that step parent again. So I couldn't understand that as a kid. Like I think I internalized that. I didn't understand like what had I done. And I was very protective of my dad. So I was known as like daddy's girl. My dad always had this saying like, who's the boss? And I'd be like, daddy's the boss. And I remember like always throwing that in whatever, like one of my, like my dad's girlfriends. So whenever he had someone, like, I was very protective over him. And I always felt like it was my job to. When I first started school, I remember first day of kindergarten, I was the kid that cried the whole time in the corner. My mom worked, and so did my dad, so my auntie had to take me, and I literally cried the whole time. I remember having like pretty bad like separation anxiety, probably from splitting parents. I mean, I was going through a hard time now that I think about it, but I was always very observant at that age, very sensitive then too. Like I could sense the energies of kids as well. I didn't understand it as well then, but so I was always very sensitive. I always got worked up a lot, and I kept to myself. I was always very quiet, and like fast forwarding into middle school, that's when things really started to change for me. All that, like, as I was going on to, like, I had my split family or whatever, so that was a constant like changing, except for on my mom's side, like I had those 3 step siblings, but with my dad it was always just like it was constantly changing, so a lot of that caused whatever it caused.
Did you find that between staying with each parent, did you act differently depending on what house you were at? So almost like you had 2 faces. Yes. For if I was at this house or if I was at this house, like almost like 2 different personalities, basically.
Yeah. Well, I always like refer to my mom was the drill sarge and my dad was the fun. Like, whereas like when I went to dad's, there was no rules at dad's. Not that my dad didn't take care of us, but it was a lot more laid back. There wasn't as much structure. Yeah. And my mom's, it was also just being at my mom's because my stepfather's kids, so my step siblings, they were only there part-time too, so they come in, that the whole dynamic of the house would change when they were there, and then when they leave, then everything would change. Like, so nothing was like static, nothing was guaranteed, everything was constantly changing, so I kept like feeling uneasy, like there was nothing that I could control. So naturally, as I got older, I became a control freak. Like anything I could do to help subside the anxiety, I controlled. So every outcome, like even to the point now, like I've talked about it, like the food that I ingest, and just always feeling anxious and looking for an outlet.
Well, and I think this is an important thing because we're both 29, millennials, and I think this is such a relatable situation to so many people our age and in our generation that like, fuck, I don't know, it's got to be at least like 75-80% of kids come from almost the same situation.
Yeah.
And there's got to be lots of similarities into feelings, and that's why I brought up, did you act different at your mom's house versus your dad's house? Because I remember doing that myself because I come from the same thing, a split family, right? Yeah. And just having the 2 different dynamics and learning how to act in each one.
I just learned to become very guarded, especially, I feel bad talking about it like this, but this is just my truth. This was my perception. I love my father so much, but very on guard. I learned how to be on guard when at my father's house. My mom's house generally was a safe haven because, I mean, at least I knew I could predict a little more what was going to happen there. At my dad's, I mean, there was different women, and a lot of the women weren't very nice. They weren't mother figures. They didn't have a very soft side to them. So learning now too with like that inner critic, a lot of those voices that I have in my head is from those women, and I'm learning that actually. I used to be like, oh, it's my father, but I'm like, no, it's in the environment that I was in. So quick hitting like middle school, that's age 11 to 13 in Prince George, Heather Park, Holler. I remember grade 6 is when it kind of changed, and I actually kind of turned really like dark and depressed. I think that's when depression really started. I remember I used to spend like most of my time locked up in my bedroom. Like even when all the kids would be over at the house, I'd be upstairs playing like the saddest music possible, and usually just like staring at myself in the mirror or like writing poetry, like journaling. Or I actually had a habit of cutting myself as a sense of relief. I remember just always feeling so like not like I didn't belong, and it was a sense, a relief. It was a relief. It was something like, it was tangible. I could look at myself and be like, oh, I'm bleeding. Okay. Like that hurts. So it was a distraction, I think. So in a form, it was like self-medicating in a way. Like that was like the only way I knew how. It was my outlet.
Well, obviously at this point, like you're hurting quite a bit because,
Yes. Yeah,
you know, kids who are cutting themselves got to be fucking hurting.
Yeah.
Like that isn't, you know, normal behavior. I don't think. I'm not putting judgment on you or anything. I'm just acknowledging that you must have been in a pretty shitty space to be doing that.
Well, and even like body image for me started, I remember, because what's it called? Matured, hit puberty very quickly as well. So I remember being 10 in grade 5 and like getting my first bra and feeling very self-conscious about my body. And I always thought, like, I remember when I would sit in my desk in grade 5, I would always pull my desk so tight, like so that it would stab me in the ribs or whatever, just so I could feel safe. Like I just felt like so insecure of my body, and just like if I had to get up to go to the bathroom like in the middle class, I would just hold it because I just hated the thought of someone watching me. I was not a big kid, like I was a little child, like I wasn't. So just when I see that now, it's quite sad. So I just always just did not feel safe in my own skin. I always felt very awkward. I always felt like everyone was against me, or I never trusted my friends. Like, unless my friends would actually be like, oh, come sit with us for lunch, I would sit there by myself. I would not invite myself because the thought of being rejected, like, killed me. Like, I did everything possible from such a young age to protect myself so that I couldn't get hurt. And in grade 6 is when I started smoking weed, started smoking cigarettes, that's when I was cutting myself, and drinking. And like, I remember right from the first time I started drinking, naturally like my dad and my mom, like growing up, they would let us have like New Year's or whatever, have a drink or whatever, quite young. But the first time I actually got really drunk was I was 11. It was stealing my parents' alcohol and like getting blackout, you know, and you like make the freaking mixture of every kind of alcohol. And I freaking loved it. I remember sitting when I like passing out on the floor, like I spun, and I remember like thinking like, this is freaking awesome. Like this is the life. Like I felt like so grown up, and I could express myself freely. Like I actually didn't give a shit what anybody thought. So naturally, like it just became like, anyway, I remember even like coming home from school and knowing like, okay, my parents aren't gonna be home for 2 hours. I would like crack open a beer and make a clam and beer and drink 2 of those and like dance to music. And then when they come home, I'd go upstairs.
But like, and if you think about it, so, you know, at such a young age, you're already having all these emotions and feelings, and, you know, you're starting to cut yourself to get away. And then all of a sudden you kind of discover alcohol. And you're like, holy shit, this feels better.
And
like,
cutting stopped, of course, naturally, because it was like, well, if I couldn't get the alcohol, or I didn't have some kind of outlet, I would still cut every once in a while. But it was like, this was my new medicine. Like this made me feel good about myself, and it wasn't isolating anymore, right? I could go out and like do that with friends, and that was super exciting. And then I was able to talk to boys, and I was fun until eventually like I was the girl that always like was blacked out, and they would have to like hold my hair back, and I was puking. So like, and it just progressed through high school. Like being in school, like I always hated Mondays. I dreaded Mondays because I'd be like, what the fuck did I do like on the weekends? And I was never allowed. My mom always had me like a very short reign, but I was never where I said I was. So like I would always be like, I'm staying over at so-and-so's house, sleeping the night, but actually like, and I'd be like, oh, we're just gonna watch movies, but really I'd be like in a ditch barfing somewhere, like nearly dying, and thinking it was like the time of my life. And once I hit 15, that's when I got into heavier drugs. Cocaine, ecstasy, ketamine, lots of uppers. And I remember I had this one friend, I love her still to this day. But her house was the hangout house. So like every weekend I just would love it, because then we would like divvy up all our money and then go get our drugs, and we would just have a bunch of like boys over, and we would just lay around and get high. And then that constant fear though too of like living 2 separate lives and kind of keep that like secret from my family, because although I mean I was kind of a shit disturber at home, I did try my best to have as much respect. Like I still loved my parents and wanted them to think the best of me. So like I had that in me. Like I wasn't just like this troublemaker rebel who like didn't give a fuck, because I actually always did give a fuck. I cared what people thought about me. I wanted people to be proud of me. I wanted my dad to love me and my mom to love me, and I wanted to make something of myself. It was just these 2 people. I had these 2 poles, right? Yeah, and then naturally, I mean, I don't know why I say naturally. It's like naturally, but this isn't everybody's story. Once I hit 16, my mother. So at the time, my dad was living in Alberta, Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, and it was like the last straw where I had promised Mom I wasn't gonna drink this time. I wasn't gonna be doing anything bad. And my mom's like, okay, you can go out for a couple hours, and I ended up coming home shit faced, like and trying to hide it. And my mom gave me the ultimatum, like, either you're gonna get help. I still to this day don't know what that meant.
So how old were you here?
16.
16.
My mom's like, you're gonna get help or you're moving to your dad's. And like leading up to that, I was already getting like trouble with like boys. I was getting suspended from school, whether it was fights or just stupid shit. And I had some pretty like important things happen in my life at that point too, like being in bad situations, being around people that I shouldn't have. And also like at that point, I remember being like 13, 14 hanging out with like 25-year-olds, and they were like the town's drug dealers, and thinking like that was fucking sweet. I'm like, this is cool. Like, just that mindset. I don't know, like wanting to be something, wanting to be important. And naturally, I didn't click with younger people also. So like, yeah. But anyways, I took in my mind, it was the easy way out. I was like, oh, I'll go live with Dad, because I didn't, when I say that now, like, I don't really know why I didn't take help, because I didn't know what help was. I think I just wanted to get out of trouble. And like right now, like my stepdad and my mom were not happy with me anymore. So it's like, I thought in my head, like if I just moved, like it was my situation, it was my surroundings, that was the problem. If I could just move, then like everything would be fine. Because there was this part of me too, it was like, why can't I drink like everybody else? Like, why is everybody able to just have a couple beers and like go to like a pit party and have fun? Like, why is it so impossible? Like, I literally was not capable of doing that. And I was getting to the point, like, I wasn't fun anymore. Like, I was like always getting blackout drunk, crying, like just getting like just
starting to piss the friends off.
The friends off. They were sick of taking care of me.
So you were ready to move anyways.
I was ready to move. I just wanted to run, basically. I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, perfect timing, because I don't think anyone else is willing to put up with my shit no more, right? So when I moved to my dad's, I cleaned up for about like a good year, because I didn't know anyone, right? Like, I started fresh. It was grade 11 and 12 that I had moved there for. And for the first year, I had a couple friends, but I kind of kept to myself. And also when I first moved there, like the girls I was a pretty girl, new girl coming to school, and like the cute boy automatically, like on my first week, asked me out, wanted me to come to the party. So not like immediately all the girls hated me. They spread rumors about me, said I was like just horrible things. So I just learned to keep to myself. Like, it was terrifying.
I know, and that's the funny thing, like the difference between like boys and girls. Like, girls I find can be like mean to each other. Mean. Where boys, like with me, motherfucker wants to fight, okay, let's fight. Somebody wins, and then it's over with. Okay, right on, move on, right? Yeah. Whereas girls will do like heinous shit to each other and like spread rumors and just do like mean shit.
Yeah, and I remember just like walking through the hallway and being like so like uncomfortable, because it was a whole new town. I hadn't changed, like even like changing grades in schools, like changing elementary to middle school to high school. I always had that support blanket of like either my siblings were there, or so I was like by myself. It was just me, and it just was scary time, but I think it was probably good for me in some way. And I remember grade 12 was when I met my first real boyfriend. I had little boyfriends before that, but it wasn't. So I met my first love or whatever. And that was the beginning of when shit like really took off for me. At first it was fun. And naturally, because of that, he introduced me to more friends. So then I had like a group of people that like I belonged to in a way. So that was nice. That was exciting. And so drinking picked up. I was going to more parties, started doing more drugs. I always smoked weed. Like, I don't think that ever stopped. I think I just always smoked weed. Then cocaine use started happening again, but we didn't get too heavy into it after I split up. That relationship, it was actually like an abusive relationship. It was not a healthy relationship, I think, on both ends. So that kind of spiraled me down. My life was not a very stable lifestyle at that point. My dad was splitting up from his long-term relationship, and I ended up taking a lot of the responsibility for that. Became the scapegoat for why that relationship didn't last. There was abuse on the stepmom's side. She, like, towards me. There was just my home life was not safe. It was not healthy. So my relationship with that guy also was not healthy. So, like, there would be times where I'd, like, go running home crying and going to my dad being like, why? Like, I don't understand. But he didn't know how to comfort me because he was living the exact same lifestyle I was. So, like, literally I was surrounded. Like, it's hard to, like, know something's, like, naturally, like, or stop saying naturally. At first it felt wrong when things would happen, like when like, physically, emotionally. But when you're seeing it around you, even with the drinking, right? When you're seeing it around you and it's, like, constantly happening and, like, it's normal.
Yeah, it's normal.
How are you going to change? Like, you don't need to change. You're like, oh, shit, I'm the problem.
Yeah.
And that means that, like, I need to just, like, toughen up, or I'm too sensitive or whatever. So that just, like, sped things up. And I will say, though, like, even though things got really bad, like, I'm so grateful for it. And I had, like, a lot of fun times, even with the drugs, and that's sad to say, but, like, I had so much freaking fun. It was fun until it wasn't fun anymore. When I split from that partner, I ended up having, like, 2 years of, like, just fun. I ended up hanging out with these older girls, like, just made new friends. We were drinking and partying every night. One of them I worked with, so, like, we would work the evening shift, get off at 11:30, go home, drink, like, 2 big bottles of wine, then go to the bar across the street, come home, then do rails all night. Like, it was just, like, a thing. And I was like, this is fun. Like, finally freedom. They were friends that I had created for myself. And that, yeah. So I think, like, 2 years, and that's when things got, like, really bad. I keep saying that really bad, but, like, I feel like I had so many freaking bottoms. Like, there was just, like the next thing. Because then when that happened, I ended up losing my job. I got fired. And there was quite a long period where I wasn't working. And that's when I met another partner who, again, was not well. He was not good for me. We were not good for each other. And I actually got involved with illegal actions. I never even got, like, caught, which is, like, I'm like, holy shit, like, this whole time there was always, like, a silver lining. There was always something looking out for me. And even at my lowest time, I remember, I don't really want to get too much into it. Basically, it's a lot of the same stuff. So maybe different drugs. It just kept going lower and lower. And the people around me started getting sick of me. And they, like, eventually they just stopped calling me. They stopped checking on me. They were sick of hearing the same story and over again. And I was sick of myself too. So I understood. And I literally just convinced myself, like, well, this is how it's supposed to be. Like, it just felt easier to accept that, like, okay, let's just be me and him against the world. I don't need anybody else. And me in this TV set, we'd watch movies every day and, like, do our drugs. And I was just trying to find a way to find comfort because I didn't know how to get myself out. But even at my darkest time, I remember sitting in my living room. I hadn't showered for probably a week. Like, I hadn't brushed my teeth. Like, I was just not able to take care of myself. Even the thought of, like, opening a cupboard to get a glass to get water, I couldn't even manage to, like, close that cupboard again. Like, it was just too much effort. Like, I just could not do it. My other job that I was at too was crumbling. So I really had nothing else to lose. So I remember just sitting there being like, okay, like, I know this isn't it for me. Like, I always knew, you know, about how bad it is, that, like, I had, like, this strong connection to something. Like, there was always something good. There was always something looking out for me. And there were still people, even though I couldn't see them, looking out for me. And so I ended up having, I guess I would call it, like, an intervention at work. It was people at work that saw what I was doing, and so grateful for them. And they ended up, like, packing my whole apartment up and moving me to Vancouver, BC to be with my mom. That's where she was living with her husband at the time. I still wasn't really owning up to what was going on. In my mind, I was just moving there to get away from the relationship I was in. And it was just, like, to take care of myself because I wasn't managing. And on the outside, like, it more so just looked like I was super depressed and, like, something really bad was going on. So, that was literally the beginning.
So how old were you there? So
I was 22.
22.
So it was December 17th, 2012 is when it was the day I moved to BC. And that's when, and within 3 months from there, that's when I ended up going to rehab. I just kind of like, I couldn't hide it, right? I mean, I went from using drugs every day to maintain myself to not having that. I didn't think about that when I moved there. And so I had to get honest. Like this is what's going on for me. I remember feeling so sick. I was so depressed. I was sweating so bad because at that time I was on opioids. So that became like, I was just downers, right? So feeling really sick and just having to be like, I just vomited everything out of me, like telling my mom everything, like, and I, things that she didn't need to know. And I just still am like, oh God, like I probably, like, I don't know how she slept at night. She doesn't, she still doesn't sleep at night. And she tells me still to this day, like she's afraid to like get mad at me sometimes because she thinks she doesn't want to be the cause of anything, of me going off the rails again. So, like, I pray to God, like, having a daughter now, I'm like, oh, my Jesus. Like, I don't ever want to go through that, but I do know that if we do, we're going to be well-equipped with us.
Well, and I think it's like you're saying, like, we can't never say never, right? But, I feel like both of us are in such a good spot in our lives right now, and we know what sober living has done for us, and it's like, I get shit done when I'm sober. It's just that good feeling, the work ethic's there, the motivation's there. But if I'm drinking, that shit all changes. And so like now I know that like down into my core, and it's super helpful being in a relationship with a person who doesn't drink as well and who's on the same page. Like I don't think I'd be able to do it as easy if not for that.
No, I agree 100%. So, like, I don't regret anything. Like, I mean, there's some things that hurt really bad and they still hurt today, but I feel like I knew, like, even at a young age, I remember telling Jamey this too, like, I think it was like 4 or 5 and watching a movie, and there was this strung out strippers on a bar. It was in a movie, and thinking, like, I want that. I'm going to be that. And, but it was like, it wasn't a bad thing. It was like, yep, that's what I'm going to do. And before I was like, I would analyze it being like, oh my God, like that's so sad. But I'm like, you know what? Like I'm kind of one of those woo woo people. And I believe that we all have a predetermined purpose. Like there's a reason why we go through this shit. There's a reason why we have these painful experiences in our life and why sometimes we're dealt the shitty cards, like why we don't have the best parents. And it's because it's predetermined. Like I had this shit. So that I have a message to carry. Like I'm still trying to figure out like what, it's like looking at what my strengths are, right? Like because of those experiences, it has made me the most compassionate, empathetic, like just understanding human. Like I can see somebody and I can feel their pain so deeply because I've hurt so badly myself.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to do is cause anybody else pain. And I can feel that as well for someone else. So when I see someone else hurting someone else, it hurts me so badly and that's for me, it's like I can't watch the news without it affecting me. And I know there's a lot of haters out there with people who are like, oh, I'm empathetic and whatever. For whatever reason, you've got your own issues around that. But to be empathetic is actually a gift. And I feel like we need more of it. And I think everyone is empathetic. It's just that it's whether or not you've opened yourself up to the experiences you've had. A lot of people end up they get hurt so bad that they end up just shutting down and letting those experiences turn them hard and cold and sharp. And I'm saying that, but like, even though I'm not like a vicious person, but I do have that in me. Like, it's like teaching myself, like this mantra I've been saying a lot in my head lately is like, be softer. How can you be softer in this moment? And
well, self-awareness, I think, is so key, man, to practice self-awareness all the time and to really want to be a better person, because I'm trying to do that day by day. What can I do to practice being a better person? Because really, like, my opinion is we should all be striving for that, and we should all be striving to help each other and be, like you said, empathetic. And even if sometimes you need to consciously, in your head, if you're annoyed with somebody and whatever, and in your head you're thinking, fuck, I don't want to listen to this person, I don't want to this. But again, really practice putting yourself in that person's shoes. And like this happened for me the other day where a guy was kind of venting to me, and I just thought to myself, man, this guy obviously needs somebody to talk to. So I can just be that person for now. I don't need to judge him, even though I kind of was in my head, but just that self-awareness of it, right? And that's growth. And like, I want to be that person. I want to continue growing.
And like afterwards, he, like the next day he came up to you, and that was basically like, you help by doing that to somebody, you give them the gift of like healing, like, and whatever he was going through, he even came up to you and said like, wow, thank you so much. Right. Like that's, and when you barely said anything, but yet that was like, you gave him space to just vent. And even though like to be compassionate, understanding, and give people like unconditional love, it doesn't mean that you have to take their shit either. It doesn't mean that you become like a doormat. It doesn't mean that it's not okay for you to get angry. I think that's important too, because a lot of us growing up are taught like, it's not, your emotions are not okay. Like, it's not okay for you to be angry because it's an inconvenience for whoever. So I think it's important to address if somebody's hurt you or whatever you're going through, especially for the little ones. Like, I know with Zyla, and I know you do that with Wesley as well. Like growing up, like if they're having an emotion, allow your kid to express it. Don't tell them like, oh, you're okay, you're fine. Let them cry. Because then that shit's going to pop up 10 years, 20 years from now. And they're going to be like, why am I sad? Like, what is going on? This is so important. So it's like very basic stuff. But I find with me going to like rehab and all that, like I had to learn all that because I couldn't believe it. Like now I'm like, how do people not know how to do that?
Yeah. And communication is like such an important thing. And so many people, and this is just, again, my judgment or opinion. I don't mean it to sound like a judgment, but this is my reality, is so many people just do not have the communication skills. And I'm just so grateful for the shit that I've learned, like from becoming sober and actually learning how to communicate and acknowledge my feelings and expressing my feelings, because that shit is just so important. Yeah. So you were saying, so 22?
I was years old, yeah.
When you first sobered up?
Yeah.
And then
went in treatment.
Did you have a relapse?
I did have a relapse, yeah, and I lied about it for a good month. I ended up taking like a 6-month chip when I was not sober. I was just so afraid of disappointing my family. I was so disappointed in myself. And it was really hard for me to come back. And even like when I did end up coming back, I did a program that helps with people with alcoholics, drug addicts, whatever. I never did like announce come back. I just all of a sudden like waited for my 30 days to come back, and I grabbed it, and everyone's like, what? And I'm like, I don't know, like, because there was so much shame around it, but like people don't care. But I know that relapse was, I'm still learning. This is a lesson I'm still learning today. It came from me like feeling like I needed to fit inside a box. Like I always feel like there's a box that I need to fit in no matter where it is. So it was like my recovery knee must look like this, and I need to, and it didn't fit. Like I am a sensitive being, and I'm also very self-aware. Even when I'm not doing very well in my life, I'm very self-aware, and I'm watching things that people are doing that were keeping them sober, but it wasn't working for me. So naturally I felt like, well, what's wrong with me? Then I must be doing it wrong. And I would try even harder. And I feel like I just kind of burned myself out. And then I felt ashamed. So I didn't ask for the help that I needed. And I just kind of said, fuck it. And I picked up again. And yeah, and it got bad before it got good again. Like it actually went down like really, really fast. And I picked up like a harder, it was amazing to me, like how quickly it just like got really bad. Yeah, but because I had a little bit of recovery in, and has already
you had some knowledge on what to do.
Knowledge, but I had cleaned up my vibration. Like I was already in a better place. So the moment that I like slipped back just slightly to where I was, like it felt awful. Like it felt worse than it ever had before. Like I was like, I gotta get out of this. And I went back and I did like a relapse prevention and all that, and there was help there for me. Like there was a lot of help for me. People want to help. Like when you are super open and honest and vulnerable, and it's amazing how many people are like, oh, let me help you. But like when you keep on like, because I'm really bad for that, is keeping on like that proud face and acting like everything's okay and you got this shit, I'm gonna figure it out. Because I still to this day I'll be like struggling so bad, but nobody will find out until after I figured out, like until I'm like up the other side. I'm like, oh, by the way, like I was like suicidal, or oh my God, like I don't recommend that to anybody. But there's like solutions, and and to use like, yes, the schools are kind of flawed in like teaching kids how to like take care of themselves and like self-soothe and like the teaching self-awareness. But nowadays I feel like that's not really an excuse anymore for parents, because there are so many free courses, there's so many free like references, there's books, there's endless podcasts, there's so many things that teach that. So I think it's like it's not an easy job, but it starts with the parents and their kids, right? So, because I mean, alcoholism and addiction is like such a big deal now, and there's people dying constantly, and it needs to start somewhere. So instead of pointing the finger at someone else, I always just start taking responsibility for it and nipping the bud. I mean, I don't really know like we can completely kill addiction in any form, but I think like we can do our part by like not creating damage and trauma to our kids and healing our own trauma so that we're not passing it on. So that like it's not like it's like generational trauma, right? Like I feel like today, like I'm still trying to heal the traumas of my mother and my father, and like that's okay because I want to do that. And I think when one family member can heal that, naturally like the whole family benefits from that, right? It almost sets the family free, and like I'm willing to do that. Like I want to do that. Like, I want to do that for my family, and I want to do that for Zyla, like, and for you. And like as our relationship, it's like being a healthy, like I feel like we're pretty set. Like I feel like we're doing pretty damn good. We're pretty advanced because we had the benefit of going to the funny farm, like a rehab.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, it's like what I was talking about with the communication skills. Like that's so important in a relationship. And really, like I was saying, just over this last year, we've really, really stepped our game up in that. And it's just, it makes me feel so much stronger in our relationship. And like I had told you the other day, like it was like the first time in my life where I just have this like knowingness, like in my like core, that just like we're spending our life together and like we're creating our life. And it's just like I have this like knowingness about it, and it's just like a relief basically. And it's a good feeling. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons too, is like when I first met you, like I was like, you're not anything of what I've experienced before. Like you're foreign to me. Like you were so calm. Like I was used to storms, man. And if there wasn't a storm, I create the storm, but you were just too calm that it was almost like unattractive at first. Cause I'm like, well, like I didn't understand it. It was too safe. It just felt too safe. It wasn't what I was used to. But I'm so grateful that I stuck with it, because you were exactly what I've been needing. And I feel like you were like perfect timing as well, because I was ready to receive that. Right. And because of that, like we've grown so much. And the other thing is like having that child, like having Zyla, is a fucking miracle, because my entire life I've said I don't want children, because I did not feel worthy of having a child. I didn't feel worthy. The whole idea, I just convinced myself that like there's no way that I was capable of, but it really is just because I didn't love myself enough. And de-thawing and like by being in a loving relationship, it just like it opened my freaking heart. Like I remember that moment where like my heart just cracked open. I was like, I want to be a mom. Like it just wasn't an option for me before. I was never in a safe loving position before with another human. So having that with you is just like, it transformed me. Like I'm still fucked up in so many ways, and I'm still like a work in progress, but like holy shit, like it just like, thank God. Like I think of like, what would I be doing with my life if I wasn't a mom? Like what the hell would I be doing? I don't know. Like she's teaching me so much, and she's not even 6 months old. That's crazy. That's cool. And I hope the people can get something from the story. I'm sure I'm going to listen to it over and over again, being like, oh my God, I should have said that. I shouldn't have said this.
It's all good. It is what it is. And congrats on going on 6 years. Like that's pretty amazing.
I just think too, like with doing these things, I want to remain transparent. Like I want this to be like a place of message. We had recorded something already previous to this, and we've decided to make this recording instead, because I don't know. Like just wanting it to be a positive spin. I'm hoping this isn't too negative, but I don't want to scare anyone away, but I want this channel to be like inspiring to people, and I want it to have like a solution base rather than the problem base. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, next week, I think I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to tell my kind of story next week. So if you guys aren't subscribed yet, definitely go subscribe. YouTube, all the podcast channels. I'll put a link in the description so you guys are all aware of where to go do that. And thank you guys so much for the support. It's been awesome. It's just been super, super fun doing this with you, Katy. Like, I just think doing this is even great for our relationship as well. And it's like nice because we never really had like a hobby for us to do together before. Like we did shit together, right? But like now this is something we're building together, and it's like we get excited about it. We have fun
like
doing
a legacy. We're building a legacy in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much, and we will see you next week.